No way. You went to love that guy? Japan? Nice. Pretty tight.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Well, it's roughly 10 after 2, and I think, as I saw this morning, everyone is self-starting up here. So I'm Professor Michael Utzinger. I'm a professor of architecture at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. And along with Layla, Qarout, who's a doctoral student in architecture, we have a presentation on building structures, embodied energy, and carbon emissions, which we put together over the last 3 days. There, if you were looking at the original listing, there was someone else going to speak on housing. I am also a consultant. I'm both a registered architect and a professional engineer, and have worked on 1 platinum and 3 LEED gold buildings, 3 AIA top 10 buildings, primarily as an engineering and ecological consultant. This morning we had some very good broad introductions of issues, from what you might be concerned about looking for jobs coming out of college, to where LEED version 4 is going, to what all is going on in looking at all of the issues relative to materials and material selection and toxicity. This is going to be something a little bit different. It's actually not looking at broad issues, but rather getting very specific with a specific building. We're going to look at the structure, the Alla Leopold Foundation Legacy Center. This building was completed in 2007, received LEED Platinum, and received the first innovation point for carbon neutral operation. And my responsibility on that project was the net zero carbon neutral process in the integrated family. They're used a variety of other local materials. There's local stone that was used in the project. Concrete was not necessarily local, that's fairly standard. But I want to just briefly introduce the building and then turn it over to Layla, who will talk about the energy and the environmental assessment. The Alva Leopold Foundation is not located in a dense urban setting, and actually for many of the LEED and building challenge processes, this is not the appropriate place to locate. However, the Alva Leopold Foundation is very much involved in rural land management issues, from regeneration of native prairies to managing forests, and it's located basically on land owned by the foundation within a mile of the shack where Alva Leopold Road, Sand County, Albany. And the program itself is really very small. This is only a little bit under 12,000 square feet total building program. The Alva Leopold Foundation wanted to do a building that met Alva Leopold's land ethic. That is, they felt that if they were going to do a building, it should be environmentally appropriate. It should not destroy the land around it if it was going to live up to Alva Leopold's land ethic, which is a chapter towards the end of the Sand County Almanac. And so in that regard, this organization in 2004 made the decision that the building was to be carbon neutral. They didn't know what that meant. We weren't entirely sure what that meant. The National Renewable Energy Laboratory had not even defined what a net zero building was at that time. And so that's basically what the team, including the organization, found. And I stress that throughout this process, the organization was really eminently involved in it. And this basically is a kind of a graph that looks at model versus measured performance. I try to, when I teach architecture, teach that you don't simply, as an architect, finish a building, take the pictures, get it in the magazine, and you're done with it. Yet most architectural firms still operate that way, unfortunately. And so what's really critical here is the second, third, and fourth graphs. The top one actually is the Woods Hole campus. It's a building designed by William McDonough, which we on the design team used as our goal for the energy utilization intensity for, in this case, kilowatt hours per meter squared per year. The fourth item down is the simulated energy use of the Alva Leopold Foundation, which was annually going to be met by photovoltaics and some wood-burning stoves for spot heating. The first and second year are what are shown up above. So it didn't actually finish net zero in terms of energy. It did, according to NREL's definition of net zero carbon, finish net zero when one looked at the entire project balance. So, this part doesn't show the carbon that's being sequestered in the forest, but this was the carbon balance. And the bottom graph is ASHRAE 90.1, in this case 2004, carbon emission based on using some of the simulated models that have been provided by the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. That's up around 120 kilograms of carbon dioxide emissions per meter squared. Measured in the Alva Leopold Foundation was around 18 kilograms of carbon dioxide per meter squared. So the building has been really a very high performance building. Now, when we, well, go ahead and go to the next slide. When you take a building down to being very close to being carbon neutral or net zero, then it really means that you have to begin to be concerned about the materials that you're using to build a building and what those impacts are. And in fact, when we sat down in the initial meeting looking at the project, we discussed what boundary to draw around the project for the carbon analysis. And we decided that we couldn't, at that time, draw the boundary around the construction because in 2005, 2006, there were too many unknowns about getting all the information from the manufacturers on carbon emissions and so on. So we said we will at least keep good data. How many of you here are in construction management? I saw some of that earlier today. They all went to the other presentation. Oh Both construction on this project kept very good information because we decided that data would need to be looked at later. Ala Leopold was very big on keeping data and keeping information about the project. So we had that data to work with, and Layla Qarout, a doctoral student, is in the process of developing a dissertation that is focusing on some of the environmental impacts of buildings. And she's basically taken this project to look at and begin to look at the energy emissions and the CO2 emissions that result from the structural materials of this project, which is the main mass of materials in the building. And I'll let Layla continue and talk about her work.
So the basis for the study to actually be able to get the accurate calculations for the embodied energy and carbon emissions for the structural materials in the building were the LEED certification documents and also the construction documents for the building. So we were able to get exactly the strength